Welcome to another episode of Get Paid for Your Pet. We're talking about a bit of a different subject today. The topic is how to quit the rat race and go all in on Airbnb. So today I'm talking with Samantha. She's one of our Legends X students, and she is thinking about quitting her day job to go all in on her short-term rental business. So Samantha, exciting times.
Very exciting, Jasper. Yes, exciting and anxiety inducing and some big decisions to come up. So thanks for taking time to chat with me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is a topic that I really like talking about because I have the experience 11 years ago. I quit my finance job to travel the world and figure out what I want to do with the rest of my life. And I've had many of my friends take a similar path. It was the best decision in my life, and so yeah, I think 10 years from now you'll probably look back and think the same.
I'm sure you're right, but right now it's definitely a point where we're kind of reflecting on. I think probably so many people like myself are reflecting on like there's got to be a better way, and so I think the experience you've had and kind of helping people exit corporate America be interesting. Just kind of learn from you a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. And for the listeners, if you've been listening to the episodes that I've been doing with Eric on the Fridays, then you know that we really believe that there's a massive opportunity in short-term rentals in the very near future, if not right now, today. We're just seeing across the board that short-term rentals are outperforming hotels, and there's several trends in place: digital nomads, remote workers, the drive to more rural and secondary markets, and there's so many trends that point in that direction that there's going to be massive demand for short-term rentals. And a lot of people like yourself, Samantha, realize that. So you're not the only one. I think there's a lot of people who do something with Airbnb. They might have one unit or a couple units, and they're considering this. They see the opportunity. So let's dive into it. Well, first of all, what made you want to get out of your day job to start with?
Yeah, I think like so many people right now, I think the pandemic's had an opportunity for, myself and my husband just to pause and reflect on kind of, is this the life that we want? I traveled quite a bit and got to a point in my career that we all had aspired to at some point. And we sat back and said, well, wait a second, we kind of want to be home and more time for family and travel and just living life, not to take it for granted. So we, like you had just mentioned, we had a couple Airbnbs on the side, and then, now we're thinking about kind of growing that business and really pivoting our life, and me specifically kind of quitting corporate America. Kind of historically, you can spend my paycheck that's provided a lot of the security. So kind of quitting corporate America is a pretty big step for us. But, I do wonder, there's probably a lot more benefits on the financial side if you can make it work. And so that's the big if, and the kind of the big mental game is kind of getting out of the security of a paycheck and believing, more in ourselves and our business and what we can do to provide that security, probably even more so into the future. So that's kind of where we are and why, and where we are in the journey, or where I'm in the journey.
For sure. Have you been to any Tony Robbins seminars by any chance?
I have not. It's funny you asked. I signed up for one, and as life would have it, I had some work commitments and had to back out. But no, I never actually attended.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I've been to a number of them, and I always notice that like 90% of the people at those seminars are entrepreneurs. And I think there's a reason for that, because as you mentioned, when you quit your job, you lose the security of that monthly paycheck. And that creates a lot of anxiety, right? And entrepreneurship is full of uncertainties. It's full of ups and downs. There's so much going on that I recognized pretty quickly after I quit my job that I wasn't mentally capable of dealing with all that stuff. I was kind of driving myself a bit crazy, like every day, like thinking about, should I do this or do that? There's so many options, so many opportunities, so many decisions to make. And so I started going to a lot of these self-improvement seminars. But one thing that I wanted to share that I took away from Tony Robbins' first seminar, I think it was UPW, is he talks about the human needs. There's four needs that every single human being has, and those are significance, love or connection, certainty, and uncertainty. Which I thought was really interesting when I first heard that, because I was like, well, how can we have a need for certainty and uncertainty? You know, aren't those opposites? But then he kind of explained it, and he said, you know, we all have these needs in different intensities. So for example, like everybody has a need for security, everybody has a need for certainty, but we also have a need for uncertainty. But certain people have a stronger need for certainty than uncertainty. And what I learned from that seminar is that I actually have a very strong need for uncertainty, which, you know, which explains why I'm always attracted to a bit of chaos in my life, you know, like traveling around, not having a home, you know, building different businesses and kind of seeing where it goes. How do you feel about that? Like, what do you think? Do you have a stronger need for certainty or uncertainty?
Yeah, I would say I probably lean more towards certainty, and that's probably become more prominent as I've gotten older with young children and real responsibilities. I think that's probably one of the points of anxiety for me in making the shift is kind of, I will be moving from, especially from a financial security perspective, very certain to now very uncertain. So I would say my comfort zone is in certainty. But it's interesting on a day-to-day basis, if I end up doing the same thing, I would go crazy. So like on a day-to-day basis, I definitely drive towards a challenge and uncertainty and breaking down barriers, doing new things, but it's usually within the construct of a very secure, certain environment, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to see as I make the transition, if that will change, if I get more comfortable in a much broader, uncertain space.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah, you know, for me, this understanding, what I learned from that seminar, what kind of helped me a little bit, where to kind of accept the fact that we have that need for certainty. So it's normal to have anxiety, you know, when you're quitting your job. So it's something that we don't have to resist, but we can just accept as part of being a human being. So that I thought that was helpful for me, because surely, and that's what I want to talk about next, surely you must have some anxiety, right, when you think about
a lot. Oh yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about, like, what if you think of that day where you're going to go up to your boss and tell that person that you're going to quit? Well, like, what kind of feelings come up for you?
Oh, it's wow. I would say just being overwhelmed, just with everything that would just happen all at once. Make the finality of that decision. You're putting all of that certainty and security behind you to now enter this new world. I think it would just be very overwhelming feeling. So something I would look forward to doing, because I think strategically it's the right decision for the reasons I discussed before. It's going to be providing the lifestyle, flexibility, kind of investing in the values that I say are important to me. But the finality of that, the one word that comes to mind, is just completely overwhelming.
Yeah, I recognize that. That's how I felt as well, because it feels like you're burning a bridge.
Yes.
Right. And that was
20 years to build this bridge, and then you're just turning your back on it.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I want to mention two things that I thought was really helpful when I went through this process. Is the first thing is to recognize your own value. Like, it feels like the day that you quit your job, it feels like you're burning a bridge. But the reality is you still have all the experience, all the skill sets, all the knowledge that you've built in your life. And there's always going to be a need for that, right? So the value that you have as a person, there's always going to be somebody that needs that value. So what I'm trying to say with that is, even though you might be burning a bridge with your current employer, but there's always going to be a company that's in need for your skills. So in that sense, like, there's always that opportunity, right? So I think that's one thing that's really important to recognize.
Makes sense. And I guess in that same construct, in corporate America, you're constantly building and refining systems and learning how to influence and sell other people. And whether we're applying that to another company who might need that, or even to our own business, I think that's interesting to reflect on. You haven't spent all of this time building skills that aren't transferable. They should really be supporting our short-term rental business as it grows into the future.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. And even if it doesn't end up working out with the business, and I mean, I know a ton of entrepreneurs, including myself, who started with something that didn't work out. Like I've started many things that didn't work out, actually. But every time you learn, I like this expression by I think it was Thomas Edison. He said, I didn't fail, I just discovered 10,000 ways that don't work.
Very good perspective.
Yeah, I thought that was a really interesting one. But yeah, I think definitely like the stuff that you learn for like being an entrepreneur is almost like going to school. You know what I mean? Like you're learning things every day, and so you're really building your skill set. You're building on your knowledge, but also like you become mentally, and your mindset grows as an entrepreneur just because you're dealing with more challenges than when you have a 9-to-5 job.
Sure.
Right. So that personal growth that you go through is also going to give you a better chance of finding a job if you ever have to, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. Oh, that makes sense. Interesting perspective.
Yeah. And I'd say, the most of the advice, and I've helped quite a few of my friends and just people in my network kind of quit their jobs, people that would reach out to me and say, hey, I saw you quit your job. I want to quit my job. Can we talk?
Right.
Like
and, me.
Yeah, exactly. Like yourself. And, a couple pieces of advice as well. When it comes to the mindset, I think there's three things that I really had to adopt to feel more comfortable in that entrepreneurial space. That is, number one is, have you heard about the book? It's called The Obstacle is the Way.
No, I haven't.
So it's by Ryan Holiday, which is one of my favorite authors.
Okay.
And he talks about how most people see an obstacle as something negative, right? As something like, oh, there's an obstacle, we got to go around it. Whereas he has a very different perspective, and that's why his book is called The Obstacle is the Way, because he argues that, the obstacle is not something we want to go around. An obstacle is something that we want to face and that we want to go through, and use obstacles as a way to grow. Right. So that was something that, so in fact, in a way, an obstacle is really a gift. And that's something that Eric and we always joke about it. Eric really likes extreme ownership. He went to a conference by the authors of extreme ownership. And, they have a similar mindset where whenever there's a challenge, instead of kind of resisting it, they just kind of embrace it. Right. Where they say, okay, great. And a challenge that's going to make us grow. It's going to make us better. Give me more. Right. So kind of like that mindset shift is something that has helped me a lot, because there's going to be so many challenges, right? Building your business comes with so many challenges. So that's the first thing that's really kind of helped me. Number two is I had to really kind of build up a tough skin or a thick skin for when it comes to the feedback that you get from your network, whether it's be your friends, your family, other people. Because I kind of found that most people prefer to give advice that's safe.
Yes. Yes. Very much.
Yeah.
I can appreciate that.
Yeah, so I think it's something that you kind of have to learn. Like you kind of have to become a little bit immune to, kind of what other people think or say that you should do, and to be really careful when it comes to seeking advice. Like because I remember like before I quit, like I asked some people and they were like, yeah, why would you quit? You have this great job. Like,
Right.
you should just keep doing what you're doing. Right. And that's this kind of the safe, the safe advice that most people will give you, because nobody wants to be responsible for you quitting your job. And then, your business doesn't work out, and no one wants to be responsible for giving you that
Right.
advice. Right.
Right. Right. No, that's fair. Just to own the decision and be comfortable in your decision and just have a wall to that advice, because it certainly will come. I'm certain of it.
Yeah, exactly. I worked with a psychotherapist a couple of years
Okay.
back, and he helps entrepreneurs essentially make more money by removing like mental blocks and stuff. It's really
Okay.
interesting. I learned a lot from
Very
this person.
interesting.
But one thing that he told me was, he was like, you gotta have a filter around you, and whenever there's communication coming from somebody, you got to decide, like, do you take it in, or just do you let it kind of, do you kind of brush it off? Like, do you keep it out? And that,
Right.
I felt that was really helpful too. So that kind of helped me not being too reactive to the world, if that makes sense.
Yes. No, I think that will be very important piece of advice. Yes. I mean, I think often we're surrounded by family who want you in that kind of secure, certain environment, friends that want you in that secure, certain environment. And now we're pushing the boundaries, saying, nope, quitting the job, getting completely unsecure, and I'm comfortable with that decision. So I think kind of filtering that advice and only taking to heart the input from those that you really want to hear and digest will be important. That'll be a challenge for me,
Yeah.
but it'll be important to keep in mind.
Yeah, I remember just thinking, like, who's achieved what I want to achieve.
Right.
Let's ask that person for advice, right?
Right. That's fair.
Because everybody
Not the
has good
person that
intentions,
retired in corporate America at 65 to, to be wondering what did I do my whole life? It's exactly right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So those are two things, like just kind of viewing obstacles as gifts, as opportunities for growth. Kind of disconnecting from what the world gives you in terms of like feedback, and then the last part, what I mentioned when I mentioned the expression by Thomas Edison, don't
Yeah.
be afraid to fail, is something that I really had to embrace. I remember when I first started with my first little business, I wanted to do everything perfect, and I was so worried that it wasn't going to work. But at some point, I recognized that meeting more entrepreneurs, like almost everybody started with something that didn't work out. I don't want to say that what you're doing is not going to work out,
Right.
right?
Fair enough.
But even like within a business, there might be parts of it that don't end up working, right? And I remember having a conversation with a very successful entrepreneur, multi-millionaire, and he told me, he was like, dude, just you learn from your mistakes, so just make all the mistakes that you can make as fast as possible, because at some point you're going to run out of mistakes, and then everything you do is going to work.
You hopefully find your way, get on the right path.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, those are kind of I think the most important things that I've noticed with my friends and people that I've kind of supported, and myself. But do you have any specific questions when it comes to this topic?
Yeah, I think kind of building off of what you were just saying, I think be curious to get your thoughts on how do you find that professional network, that support, kind of in that entrepreneurial space? How do you find those trusted resources, advisor outside of corporate America, kind of starting out? What would be some recommendations to find some of those key partners?
Yeah, that's a really good one. And just to throw another expression in there, one that I really like as well is, I can't remember who said it, but you kind of become the person, the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So for me, I kind of naturally rolled into the online entrepreneurial community because I started traveling. And I was traveling to these locations that were kind of where it was more low cost environments. So for example, Asia, South America, and you just kind of naturally end up hanging out with other travelers there, and a lot of them were doing something similar that I was doing. But I'd say the other thing, I used to go to a lot of conferences.
Okay.
I met a ton of people at conferences, and obviously right now, I think conferences are coming back, right? There was the VMRA a couple of weeks ago, I believe. So that's I think conferences are a great way to connect with like-minded individuals, but also in your own market where you live, in your own city. There's always, like, I would just Google, look on meetup.com, look for business meetups, entrepreneurial meetups. There's so many different groups, maybe even in Facebook. There's so many different groups of people that are, entrepreneurs, and it's so good to surround yourself. That's one of the most important things, I think. Like, surround yourself with other entrepreneurs that you can bounce ideas off, and just for emotional support as well.
Right. That's good advice. The other thing I'm kind of curious about, kind of the two philosophies of just burning the bridges, or do you kind of take a slow trickle into building the side business while you're still working? I'm sure you've seen kind of pros and cons of both of those, but any advice there that you would offer?
Well, here's what I'll say. I know that it feels, most people will kind of tiptoe, right? They'll start building something while they're still working, and they usually want to extend or postpone that day that they're actually going to quit as long as possible, build up some savings, and which makes sense, right? It's completely understandable. But what I've noticed is that people who stay in their job, their business tends to grow pretty slow. But once you're all in, once you've kind of burned that bridge, now like your drive to succeed in your business suddenly like becomes 10 times stronger. Right? There's this other book, The Art of War. I'm sure you heard about it. And this guy talks about how his army fights much better when there's no way to retreat, right? You're with your back against the wall. And I see that in the entrepreneurial community too. Like, oftentimes people talk about, the business that they want to build for years, and then, a couple of years later, you ask them like, hey, I thought you were working on this business, you were planning to quit your job. And oftentimes it's like, yeah, I'm still working on it. I haven't quit my job quite yet, just building up a little bit more savings, versus like somebody, who quits their job, and then like, a year later, suddenly you see on Facebook and you're like, whoa, this person is built his entire business in a year. And it's crazy how fast it can go if you're all in, and if once you burn that bridge, like, it just, everything is on steroids. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. And so I'm curious, hypothetical, but burn the bridges, all in. I mean, what's a realistic time frame? And I know it's different for everyone, but realistically, what would be the time frame where you could develop a business that's kind of self-sustaining and financially independent for your family, kind of following the course and everything that you all are teaching?
Yeah, I'd say obviously it depends a bit where you're starting off, but I'd say anywhere between 6 to 24 months.
Okay. So not a significant amount.
I think that's a reasonable time frame. Yeah.
Interesting.
So I always tell people who want to quit, who ask me for advice on this, and talking about quitting jobs and starting business, I always say like, hey, if you have to put in 60 hours a week for the next 2 years and you make $0, are you okay with that? If the answer is yes, if you're okay with that and you're still gonna continue to work on it because you're passionate about it, then go for it. But if that's something that you can't handle, then maybe it isn't the best choice.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I guess one thing that I'm sure myself and other people have pondered is like, okay, so when's the time? I understand it's going to be different. It's going to be uncertain. It's going to be scary, but like, when is the right time? And I presume the answer is there's never a right time. You just have to pull the plug, as with most big decisions in life. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I mean, very true. And I would say most people, in my opinion, make the move later, right? Or too late, maybe,
Yeah.
or it never happens, So, I mean, I think that's just a natural bias because we don't want to give up that security. So by the time you actually make that decision to quit, it's probably like a few months after you could have done it already. So I would say most people could have, I definitely could have made that decision a year earlier than I really did. I pondered about it for about a year or so until I actually made that move. And now I look back and I think, well, if I would have quit a year before that, then a year is a lot of time. That's a lot of time. There's somebody, I don't know if you might have heard about this person, John D. Loomis or John Lee Dumas. I always forget. That's which way around it is. But anyway, I met him in 2014 on a podcasting conference.
Okay.
And by the way, starting a podcast is a great way to build your network. Just
Great
throwing it out there. And I remember his story. He started a podcast called Entrepreneur on Fire, which is a very, very popular podcast, daily podcast talking about entrepreneurship. And he started his podcast because he wanted to be an entrepreneur, but he didn't know how to start. He didn't know how to do it. So he was listening to all these entrepreneurial podcasts, but they were only like once a week or twice a week. And so every day he was driving to work and he had about 30 minutes and he's like, I want to listen to a podcast about entrepreneurship every single day. But he ran out of things to listen to. So he's like, you know what? I'm going to start a podcast where I talk for 30 minutes about entrepreneurship every single day. And that became his business. And he talks about the $100,000 mistake because, he was planning to launch his podcast. He had a mentor and his mentor was like, all right, well, let's set a deadline. All right, when are you going to start this thing? And so he was like, all right, let's start it like August 1st, right? Comes August 1st. And obviously you never feel ready for something like this, for launching something new, starting a new business, quitting your job. These are just things you're never going to feel ready, right? But we're all waiting for that moment that we think is the best moment. So he said to his mentor, he was like, well, you know what, like we got to extend this. Like, let's make it September 1st, right? Because, honestly, like I'm not ready for this now. Let's wait 1 month. 1 month later, same thing. At some point, his mentor said to him, all right, you're launching this thing on this date. And if you don't, then I am not going to be your mentor anymore. Right. So then he ended up launching his podcast on that date. And a year later, I think he was making like $100,000 a month. And so then he looked back and he was like, wow, that month that I procrastinated and that I decided to like postpone, that cost me $100,000. So he calls it the $100,000 mistake.
The big lost opportunity cost. Interesting. No, that's good perspective.
Yeah.
Interesting. What do you think are the biggest mistakes? If you think about all the people that you've kind of coached and seen go through this, what are some of the biggest pitfalls that you would warn against?
I would say jumping on too many opportunities. Really focusing on one thing and doing that one thing really, really well.
Yeah.
That is what most of the successful entrepreneurs, in the short-term rental space, but also outside. I mean, this is something that, we talk about quite a bit, right? In the vision module in Legends X that you went through. It's really narrowing down our focus, getting really clear on what we want to build, what we want to do, and then just becoming the best that we can be at that one thing. Right. I think that's the best advice that I can give you.
Interesting. Yeah, I've even noticed that already. If we've started thinking about in kind of the future, and it's like, okay, we're going to start with owning, and then now we're co-hosting, and I'm like, okay, well, what about this new syndication model? And your wheels just start spinning of just the world of opportunity that's out there, and just the abundance of so many areas that we could go into. So that's very sound advice.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and that's what I love about, really building your vision is it gives you the confidence to say no to things,
Right.
right? Because if you're not clear on exactly what you want to build and an opportunity comes by, then how are you going to make the decision to decide whether this is an opportunity or a distraction? Once you have your vision, it's very simple. You just ask yourself the question, does this opportunity, is this in line with our vision? Does this align what we want to do?
Right.
The answer is yes, then you go for it. If the answer is no, then it's a distraction and you pass up on it. This is true for guests, for clients, for any decision you want to make in your business.
Interesting and good advice. No, this is super helpful. I don't know, what else would you offer? I think you've answered most of my questions. I think the mental component's the biggest part, which we spent a lot of time on at the beginning. Some great advice there, Jasper.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think really these realizations, these recognitions, like that there's always the corporate world that we can go back to, recognizing our own
Right.
value, understanding that it's a journey of ups and downs, and we're going to learn along the way, and just just believing in your vision and believing that the universe is gonna put you on the right path. I think just kind of repeating, maybe making a list of a number of those things and just reading those every single day. I know entrepreneurs who literally stand in the mirror every single morning. They have a morning routine where they have certain they call them what do you call those things?
Like a mantra or something like that.
Yeah, like affirmations or something,
Yep.
right? Which which I think is helpful because our brain is always looking for danger, right? That's why we're still alive, right? As
Right.
a human
Fair.
species, we're still alive because our brain is trying to keep us safe. Our brain is not trying to make us successful entrepreneurs, right? So it's just natural. It's just natural that our brain is always looking for where's the danger. So starting the day out by kind of calming your own mind and saying like, oh yeah, let's just remember, I have a lot of value, I have a lot of skills, I have a lot of knowledge. Like there's always, the corporate world's always there. It will never disappear. There's always a place for me to work if I need to.
Right.
um just kind of making that part of your daily morning routine, I think can be very helpful to kind of lower the anxiety levels a bit.
And help change your mindset.
Exactly, yeah. And then that's why if you go to like meditation retreats and stuff like that, it's always, a majority of people are always entrepreneurs. It's really interesting because the kind of entrepreneurship kind of forces you to get into that type of stuff because you kind of need it.
I would love to do that. It sounds like a great idea.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Awesome.
Thank you. Anything else that we should chat on? This has been super helpful. I appreciate your advice and taking a moment to chat with me.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you coming on the podcast and sharing your thoughts and what you want to do. And I think there's a lot of people, like I said, I'm sure there's a lot of people listening right now who are either planning to do the same or at least have considered it.
I'm
So,
sure. Yeah,
and
I feel like some of the statistics I've read are like up to 90% are considering changing jobs, leaving corporate America. It's just such a big change right now for so many of us. So
yeah, there's a lot going on. And just to finish with what we kind of started with is there's just a lot of opportunity right now in the short-term rental space. And I
right.
think the people that are going all in right now, like you're doing, getting the advice, learning, taking courses, as you're doing in Legends X, I really believe that that those people are going to do really well in the very near future. So
Looking forward to it. It'll be an
exciting
exciting year.
times. Exciting
Yes,
times for sure.
I
Awesome.
appreciate it.
Awesome, Samantha. Any final words you want to share with the audience?
No, just a big thank you for your support and guidance. And I'll definitely be taking some of this advice to heart. So thanks,
Awesome.
Jasper.
Well, how about this? Why don't we end with, I know you have quite a bit of experience with your short-term rentals. Let's finish it off with what's one tip, one thing that you've learned in short-term rentals that you'd share with the audience?
Sure. I think probably the most impactful lesson for us so far has been that first module, really setting your vision for what your company, who you want to be. I think that's really helped us identify kind of where we want to grow. I still think we're going to struggle with setting those boundaries as so many new opportunities come around, but kind of setting that path forward, at least for the first year, of who do we want to be for the first year, has been really critically important, and not something we had really done before the course. So I would say that's kind of the one biggest takeaway deliverable that we have so far. And then the second, I think, is kind of my second nature, but just systemizing everything. That's kind of what I do day in and day out. So probably would have done it anyway, but you're just a way that you guys approach just really formalizing, systemizing, delegating, so that you can get out of working in your business and building on your business, has been wonderful to learn.
Awesome. Well, appreciate you being in the program. Appreciate you being on the podcast. And yeah, thanks for being on. And we'll see each other pretty soon next week on the accountability call. So
thanks again, Jasper.
Absolutely. And to the listeners, thank you for listening. Hope this was helpful. If you want to, quit your job, then feel free to reach out. And we'll be back. Eric and I will be back on Friday with another episode. So we'll see you then.